Good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is WeatherBrains, the weekly show all about weather, episode number 742, the pre-show, and you know what that means. This is the magical time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. I'm at the beach. Let's just go to the beach. In my mind. All right, so let's get the embed code going here. And once we do that, we'll get everybody on the shoe. Hope you're having a good week in these unusual times, historical times for our country. And I do believe we are good. So now let's see if we can get everybody on the line here. Be sure my audio is good. I think the audio is good. Sounds all right. Coming back. All right, let's get everybody on here and see what's happening. Obviously, I'm still home. I'll be home for a while. No telling when I'll be back. Started doing the weather standing up today. This is a second camera that's up there, and that's the one where we stand up, do the weather, the object being trying to get back to some normalcy here. This is the computer camera, which is not as good as the other one. But, you know, we are getting by with getting by here. You would not believe the what it takes to make all this happen, to go live on a chroma key wall from your house, switching graphics that are at the station, preparing graphics that are at the station, the computers, having IFB lines and having a clicker to change the graphics on the green wall, and having a monitor over here beside the green wall. About every little bit of technology that I have is being used here, which is good. I'm just glad that I have it. So let's invite everybody. I know that Troy Kimmel said he would be out. He's got a lot of issues happening where he is at the University of Texas, and you can understand that. Everybody is just in a different place right now. You don't know what day it is, or it's just different. But we are survivors. We have survived odd times in the past. We'll get through this, hopefully sooner than later. I have no earthly idea when I'll be back at the TV station. And if we have severe weather, we are planning to all be back there and do it that way. It's really hard managing a tornado event here. You can do it. I mean, you can do it, but it's... So let's see here. So apparently I have to admit everybody. This is something new. You know, Zoom has had some security problems where they've had some Zoom, what do they call it? Zoom bombing, where people popped in the nude. Bill, you're not in the nude, are you? And he can't hear a word I'm saying. He's got that look of gas on his face. So, but yeah, so apparently now you have to physically bring in people to these Zoom conferences, where before they just popped in. And apparently, due to some type of security issue, people popped in and doing inappropriate things and things that you shouldn't be doing. And Bill just hung up on us. We'll try him again. I feel like I got the power here now. See, you can't get on this show unless I clear you on here. I got some power finally. Power. Bill, can you hear us? You got that look of gas on your face. Aubrey, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Jen, can you hear us? We can't hear a word you're saying. You might be muted.
Okay, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Is
Hi,
there a
guys.
way is there a way by chance you could drop your mic a little bit because it covers up your face?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can even. How's that? A little bit better?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. And just
Sure, no problem.
it's
Hi, Jen,
it's
how are you?
hard.
I'm doing good. How are you, Aubrey?
Good.
It's hard having these radio setups and you're trying to do video because
Yeah.
these mics are so big. In fact, I have for the first week of doing weather at home, I used this mic on the air and sat down, but now I've got a lav from the TV station, so I'm standing up back here,
Mm-hmm.
which is the norm that you expect on television. We're just trying to get back to some normalcy here.
Yeah, it's been hard.
Um,
That's for sure.
I've got two cameras. This is the one that is the chroma key shot for the stand up. Like, by the way, I'm wearing pants. I'm wearing.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And to stand up, you have to wear a suit. I got to start wearing suits again. But I've got on camouflage cargo shorts. So here you go.
Oh, we got the James Bond beach look going on.
Yeah. I mean,
Nice. Love it. That's awesome.
but no, during the weather, we key the Baron Lynx system back here. And as a clicker, I'm using either a phone or a little iPad mini because you got to have a clicker back there. And the other option would be to step on a space bar on the floor, and that's a disaster waiting to happen. So I'm not using the space bar on the floor. I'm using a little iPad mini. And to do this at home, it takes every little doodad I have. You have to have an IFB going. I'm using Google Voice for that. I've got a camera rigged up against the window called the span cam so you can see outside, which is a phone. I've got an iPad on the side of the green wall so I can see, what I'm looking at back there.
Oh my goodness.
It's and again, I was not, I don't think anybody was, expecting to be out for 6 or 8 weeks at your house. The weakest link in the chain for me, it's this camera. I really don't have a good broadcast quality camera. This is the highest quality camera that I've got. And this is an old Logitech C920. And I think these things cost like $40 or something. I mean, it's old, it's cheap, but it's the best I got. I mean, and now if you try and find a webcam now on Amazon or any, Best Buy, those Logitech like stream cams that would be $169, they're $400 now. I mean, you can't buy these webcams. And I refuse to pay that much for these things. So, I've got to. I keep forgetting. I got to admit these people every time.
Yeah, is that a security change? I noticed that.
Yeah, Zoom has had a problem with people somehow getting into these conferences like this, and they're doing things that are naughty, and they've had a number of like medical conferences where people would do that, and so apparently now you have to, if you're the initiator of the conference, you have to allow everybody in and approve them. It's part of their security change. They have had all kind of security issues, and like everybody else, I don't think they were expecting the world to be using their platform here all of a sudden, but you just do the best you can. So I guess that's part of their security change.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing Bill and Nate, they've tried to join 3 times. Bill has that horrified look on his face, like he has No audio.
Or is he frozen?
Well, he texted. He said he couldn't hear us, and so he tried rebooting.
I had to re-hit join with audio again for some reason.
Yes, I did too. Oh no, his video's gone.
I'll text him that.
Well, while we're sitting here, James, can I tell you something?
Sure.
So my goddaughter, she's 8. Her name is Maylee Marie. She called me a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, Aunt Jen, I watched your friend. And I said, you did? And so she goes, I watched your friend James. He's so funny. And she just absolutely loved your show. She was fascinated with the green screen. But
How old is she?
She's 8.
Now, see, those are my people. Those are my people. They think I'm funny. I would teach 3rd grade science if I didn't do this. Adults don't like me. Preschoolers don't like me. Middle school kids don't like me. And high school kids don't like me.
Well, you got it in with this 8-year-old. She thought you hung the moon. So
third graders are the greatest. Oh, and they're honest. They learn. They soak it up like a sponge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You can kick it up, and they understand sarcasm. You know, you come into like preschool and you come in there and you have to do the, hello, friends. I can't do that. It's just not working for me.
You there, Bill?
Well, they've kind of changed Zoom a little bit, and when he let me in the door, it was not giving me the join with audio part, or so I wasn't getting to that point. So I could hear y'all. I mean, I couldn't hear y'all, but I don't know if you could hear me or not.
Mm-mm.
So yeah,
Now
that
we
was not checked. We use Zoom all day today, though. I mean, in and out, over and over, meeting after. So, but that was what was missing.
They've had a big problem with
people drawing things on screen.
Bad actors crashing into these conferences, like with nudity and all this other stuff. It's not good, and so they've had to tighten up their. Yeah.
So you had to let us in, James, one at a time.
Yeah, you can't get in unless the initiator of the conference lets you in, apparently. We're doing a hospital board meeting with this platform Thursday.
Yeah, we're doing a CVB board meeting that way, too.
Our company's told us they really don't want us using it.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of
people. That's
what
the FBI says.
Now, do you think it'll let me share my screen? Should I try before we get going?
Give it a test.
Okay. I just want to see if it'll.
We're live on jamespan247.com, so be sure you got all of your.
Yes, about to say, let's hope it's not ugly because we are now on television. So welcome to our television viewers.
Wow.
And to our FCC minders and overlords.
That's right.
I didn't know that applied. Does that apply?
When it's being broadcast on Jamespan 24/7, we're over the air, baby.
We are on the air everywhere. In fact, I'm watching us right now. I've got a monitor here in this room so I can see, and we are on the television. So
can you guys see a pretty map on here?
Yes.
All right. Well, good. Everything is copyrighted. I make sure the copyright was fine. So I think we're okay with all that.
Okay, well, let's get this sucker started here. And the only thing, we have to be out on time. We have a hard out because I am in Studio A now. Instead of having to walk across to Studio A, I have to relinquish all this equipment because what enables WeatherBrains to get on the air puts me on the television. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is made possible by the generous support of TradeWeather, which allows you to enter into financial trades based on the outcome of future weather events. Get a $10 trading credit and learn more at tradeweather.com.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is WeatherBrains, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is episode number 742 for the 6th of April, 2020. It's James Spann. Thank you for joining us. What day is this? What week is this? Everybody is so confused.
And on top of that, James, I'm quitting caffeine. So this is my one Diet Coke. I've been nursing it since 5 a.m. this morning. I'm about to take the final glorious swig of it. Goodbye, Diet Coke.
Brother. He'll be sucking those things down next week. I've heard that before.
Yeah, not what the doctor says. I gotta listen to the doctor.
Well, what's the problem? I'm a lot older than you. I'm healthy as could
You
be.
work out with
I suck
NFL
these things down all day. I mean, So anyway, let's go to.
You got a tan. You got the background. Are you coming from Barbados or something?
For those that are watching, I'm live from Aruba, Jamaica. No, Nate mocked me last week. He said I look like Max Headroom, so I thought I'd try something different this week. I mean, I don't know. Usually I've got the Baron box back there, but that's probably some copyright deal or something. I don't know. I can go live.
Does it give you a good tan, or is that just natural?
I got a little bit. Now I'm working out outside instead of in the gym. The gyms are closed, so I've got a little sun here. So Aubrey, how are you? What's happening? Are you're still working? You're one of the few television meteorologists in the world actually working in a TV station still.
I am. And looking at some of the chats, it looks like some more people might be actually going back to the studio. They kind of did home for maybe a week or so, and now they're back into the studio. So I think there's might be a few more of us that are going back to the studio. But I think I've only encountered 2 people. And by encountered, I mean saw from a distance. Today. So, I mean, it's actually even slimmer than it had been over the last 2 weeks. But yep, I'm still coming in. It's I'm still kind of quarantined here by myself. And
so what's the reason, Aubrey, that they're coming back to the studios?
I don't know. I didn't detail. I just remember seeing some posts of some people that and talking to some people that they're back in studio. And I mean, we're for meteorologists, pretty much, we're kind of quarantined ourselves back here, and we clean and sanitize everything at the end of our shifts and before and everything anyways, because it is a shared workspace. But we're kind of by ourselves. And, for some people, I'm sure with some people with kids, if you saw Jennifer Ketchmark's video of her trying to do her weather forecast from home with the kids, for some people, it just might not be the best scenario. So.
It's different. Of course, we're empty nesters here, so we don't have that problem. And my wife is allergic to dogs and cats, so we don't have that problem. I mean, I have seen more than my fair share of animals walking into weather shots. So the fact that we don't have dogs, cats, hamsters, kids, it makes it a little easier here. But it's just different. I mean, and our plan is if we have severe weather, we go in.
Right.
I was in about 8 days ago for a severe weather event. It's amazingly quiet though right now. Mm-hmm. So far so good. But I think I'll be away for the foreseeable future until this thing is over. And that I've got a green wall and his conditions are okay. I've got I've got enough stuff to do it here, but. Nate, all your people are still home, right, with NBC?
Yeah, we've got 90 plus of our 100 meteorologists all doing all their regular weathers from home, pretty much for the foreseeable future. We've got a couple of exceptions for specific reasons here and there. One literally just moved last week, stuff like that. But for the most part, we've got everybody. Our goal really is to try and get as many people out of the building as we can on any sort of a regular basis. And we've been pretty successful at that, both in weather and even in places and parts of the TV station you never would have thought you've been able to do from home, we're doing from home because, the less people are out and about and congregating in groups, the harder it is for this thing to spread.
Mm-hmm. How is what's the most unique setup you've seen of all your people, Nate, at a house, in a home studio? I know you've seen them all because you've got pictures of them all.
Yeah. I think Shanna Mendiola, who's our morning meteorologist with KNBC in Los Angeles, between the tech team at her TV station, her significant other, and herself, they've set up a pretty impressive mini studio in her dining room. And we're actually feeding back 2 camera views, one of her at a monitor and then another one of her at a chroma key wall. And then they're switching those at the TV station. And other than the fact that the shot's a little tighter than it normally would be just because of the space, you wouldn't know if you didn't know. And I think that if folks are looking to do the home chroma key thing, I think that's the challenge. If you're going to do it, make it so that people can't tell you're at home. Otherwise, just doing a simple shot, sort of like in a home office kind of a setting, something like that is more than adequate for what we're trying to do.
We did double boxes last week, and where we had the graphics in a big box and I'm in a small box, and really nobody, to my knowledge, nobody griped about it. I didn't. If there was anybody complaining, I didn't see it.
I think people tend to be, they get it. I mean, they understand why we're doing it. And I don't think any of these shots, whether they're from our group or anybody else, for the most part, have looked bad. They've all been fine. Some have looked really good. And I think two things. Number one, I think it's if we're telling people to social distance, then it helps when we're doing it. It's a sort of a visual confirmation. We're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And secondly, I think for an extent, I think there are people that enjoy these little glimpses into our personal lives, right? I think for people, when your dog pops up in your lap, or there's a time and place for that, obviously, and you don't want to overdo it. But initially, I think a little bit of that is okay. People like to get to know us a little bit better by seeing our home decor or whatever. Obviously, when we start getting into severe weather season, hurricane season, things like that, I'm going to need to keep the kids at bay, need to keep the dog out of the shot, that sort of thing, so that we can focus and do what we need to do. But for the moment, the weather's been relatively quiet, and I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think you're right. People understand. So, Bill Murray, you are always at home. You
pretty much, yeah. With interspersed with substantial travel. I mean, I was in New York in January for a week and DC for a week. So yeah, I mean that's gone away. For all of our people, we're working more than we've ever worked, but I think we're getting more done than we ever did because it's easier to be, in the office just one-on-one all day long in a series of
Nate, I think the only thing that drives me nuts, it's that 2-second delay on the live view. That's the one thing that drives me nuts, is that latency.
Yeah.
So that's something so it's coming to you 2 seconds late from
it's like the old satellite truck days, when satellite trucks were new, microwave was instantaneous. And then we introduced satellite trucks, and there was a delay for the signal to get from the ground station, from the truck up to the satellite, back to the TV station. But you were always you were dialing in on a cell phone, so you heard things pretty much as they happen, but your pictures were taking 2 or 3 seconds extra to get there. And we've seen that same thing with us where, we had a Met logged on via TeamViewer, Splashtop, RDP, whatever, to see their weather graphics, and they're looking at their graphics on their Max workstation or their Lynx workstation in real time. But the words they're saying and the video of them saying those words doesn't get to the TV station at the same time. And so they're out of sync by the time they get to the TV station. And so we have to be mindful of those kinds of things. And of course, it makes crosstalk very difficult to the point where, by and large, we're, the tosses are, it's one anchor, they toss to the meteorologist, and then the Met just runs with it. There's no, back and forth, because you're going to have those 2 seconds, every time you stop talking. And that tends to make for the cleanest handoff. But it does lose a little bit of that warmth and camaraderie from the teams that, that you're able to have when everybody's in the same room.
I fixed the sync problem because I'm running the graphics through my system here, and it's fed back to the station. So it syncs up with my voice. I'm taking one of these screen outputs and just routing that into Wirecast. So, but still that 2 second delay, I want it to be tight. I'm an old radio guy. I don't like dead air. And, it's like they pitch to you and there's this pregnant pause. And so the problem, I'm always trying to guess, all right, when are they going to stop talking? And I just try and start going early. And sometimes that works. And sometimes you step on them, but you're right. For us, we do a lot of these, voice of God, here's James Spad with the weather, whatever this guy says. And I can time that out because he says the same thing every time.
Yeah.
But anyway,
like hitting the post.
We've had some stations get over that by, there's this swoosh sometimes that you'll go to weather and it's this sort of full screen takeover for 2 or 3 seconds, and there's a sound effect and whatnot. And a lot of times what we'll do is the anchor will toss, and then we'll play that swoosh that has the, a couple of seconds of audio. And about the time that's done, the meteorologist who starts talking as soon as the anchor stops, they start talking and it winds up being very clean. But you got to time that swoosh just the right way and whatnot. And again, you lose the interactivity of that anchor toss and the Q&A and that sort of thing. At the back end of the weathercast, who cares? That's happy chat. Nobody cares. But, leading in with the, anchor tossing to the meteorologist, asking a question, things like that, that can still be useful. And we're still trying to figure out how best to do that.
Yeah, but you're right. Those kind of things make it so much easier. But imagine here on this show, if we all had a 2-second delay, it wouldn't work. It would be a total disaster. So, here there's no latency in this thing. But Bill Murray, bring in Jen. Let's introduce our guest this week.
Yeah, James, we got a special WeatherBrains tonight. Stories from the storm, talking about April tornadoes. Our guest WeatherBrain is no stranger to the show. She's a radio meteorologist for the Storm Report. She's also the owner of the Tornado Talk website, which is a dynamic, information-packed website all about tornado history. Jen Narramore, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Oh, it's great to be back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're really thrilled to have you here. I didn't get to be on the show you were on last time, so this is extra special. You got the real professional setup there, Jen. You must do this for a living.
I do. So yeah, the whole working from home thing, that didn't change for me. So I just kind of slid into that role. The only thing that mainly changed was everything else stopped. So no visiting and no seeing my family and no tennis and all the other extracurricular stuff all came to a halt. But it's been super busy, and we've had plenty of tornadoes to track. And so it's been busy and just kind of moving right along. And, we're in the midst of severe weather season. So people need to know what's happening on the radio with their forecasts and, all the severe weather that's happening. So we're staying pretty busy right now.
Well, good. Well, we just ready for this thing to get back to normal, but
Absolutely.
Talk to us for a minute about where you grew up, Jen. Tell us about how you came to be what you are today.
Absolutely. Well, I was born in Indiana, so I'm a Hoosier. We moved all over and settled in Florida when I was in middle school, and that's where I got the interest in weather. I was tracking hurricanes on the little tracking chart, and just was fascinated with why they would come to the Florida coast and then move north. And I just wanted to track them. So I decided to become a meteorologist and go to school. I was going to go to Florida State. I moved to Pennsylvania and I went to Penn State and graduated in 95 with my bachelor's in meteorology. And in 97, I was blessed to work at the Weather Channel, which is where I've always wanted to work since I was 12 years old. And I worked there for 15 years, most of the time in radio. I did a 2-year stint in a different department as a product coordinator. And then in 2012, I started working for the Storm Report, doing radio from home. And I've been sticking with that ever since. And I primarily do daily forecasts and on about 55 to 60 cities around the country. At last check, it was about 55. I think we've added a couple extra, but just for me personally, I do that for about 55 cities around the country and about a dozen take severe weather coverage. So I do tornado warning coverage and what have you. So it is really busy between March and June because we have a lot of stations in Kansas. So, but yeah, that's where my interest started. And then about 3 years ago, the owner of the company, Dan Holliday, asked me if I'd like to start a podcast. And so we did, and we called it Tornado Talk. And that came about to get this interest in me for tornado history. And I absolutely just fell in love with it. And we did about 36 episodes of the podcast. And I was just proud of every episode. We talked to so many different people. We talked to Greg Forbes and Tim Marshall and survivors of tornadoes and National Weather Service meteorologists to get their insight on different events, either broadcast meteorologists. We've had James on before on 2 different podcasts. And when that came to an end, I wasn't ready to move on. So I transformed everything to this interactive website. And that's where it stands right now with over 400 summaries, all about different tornado history events. And, it was about, I guess, a year or so ago, I almost gave it up. I was starting to get a little frustrated and I'm like, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. But I have a friend of mine who I've met through this process. He's a student down in Auburn. His name's Brandon Molyneux. And he's like, I want you to stick with your passions. He goes, I don't want you to give up your. So I'm like, all right, well, let's see what we can do. So we did a survey on social media to ask people what they thought of Tornado Talk and what they liked and didn't like. And a lot of it had to do with the website, that they really liked it, but it was a little clunky and what have you. So I restructured the whole site and made it more dynamic and faster and cleaner. And then we decided we needed community. Maybe there's others that maybe want to talk about tornado history. So we jumped into the land of Discord. Are you guys familiar with Discord? It's
an appropriate name.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is. Well, we jumped in there in October, and we have now over 100 folks who are on there. A lot of them are about age of 15 to 25. So I'm everybody's mother and policing everybody. But no, they're great kids and they know their stuff. It has been amazing. You throw a tornado picture up there and they know what it is. They know what it's rated, what the path was. They will analyze damage. I mean, it is amazing to see all that they know. And we've had some really great discussions. And Discord, for those who don't know, is just a chat service. And you can have different chat rooms. And we have a weather chat area that we talk tornado history. Then we have a general chat so we can talk about other things. And we do live weather. We have tracked every tornado this year on a real-time basis, radar, local storm reports, whatever. And so it's been a lot of fun to get that community going. So as I've been seeing this kind of growing, I'm like, well, maybe Tornado Talk's going to go somewhere. It's been neat for me to see the interest. And the last thing we did is we launched a little Patreon effort. I don't expect a lot out of it, just maybe to kind of cover the server costs and the website costs, admin costs. We've been the folks who are on there, which I'm so grateful for, I get their input on different summaries. So they nominated the one I wrote yesterday, which was on the Tupelo, Mississippi anniversary. So I get them involved. And, I've just learned a great deal from these kids, and they're keeping me young. So
you just convicted me there, Jim, because you talked about the kids being able to look at the tornado and tell you who it is. I mean, I had a wall, kids my age in 1976 had Farrah Fawcett posters. I had a wall of tornado pictures. Mm-hmm. And that, you're probably going to talk about the Palm Sunday outbreak in a little bit. And, that tornado, there. Is that Elkhart, Indiana? Where was that? Nate, do you remember that famous twin tornado? You probably know, Jen. Where was that picture
Dunlap.
taken?
It was the Dunlap twins. Yeah.
And
ask the tornado expert on the call, Bill. I mean,
well, I got her
here.
I just want to hear your voice over there, Nate.
Yeah.
So exactly. So that's really cool. So how can people join that community, Jen? Is that open or is it a closed? Do you have to apply? What do you do to join that?
No, I'll make that the link for my pick of the week. I'll put the link for Discord, but you can join. Now I am pretty much about rules, not to the point where I don't want folks in there, but we didn't want it to become too disorderly and all over the place. So we have a set of rules, and all you have to do is click the little tornado icon that you accept our rules, and you can come join our chats and learn about tornado history. We have, I tell you that majority of it is the younger kids, but we have others that are in my age range. And, we have storm spotters on there, and we're hoping to just continue to grow the group from anyone who's just loves weather, loves tornadoes, but maybe doesn't know a lot about how surveys work or about the different tornado events. And I want it to be a learning experience for folks. Where we can go back and forth. And I want people to feel safe to ask questions and be like, well, I don't know anything about this tornado. So what is this all about? And so that's what I'm hoping for with this. But I'll add the link, but it's an open group. And, I hope we can see more and more people to get on there and follow along during live coverage as well, because that's really fascinating because these kids know how to operate social media and get some of the tornado photos and videos and what have you, and share that on the Discord. And we have movie night. So that's fun. We're all quarantined. We don't have any place to go. So the past couple of Friday nights, we've been watching movies, and you can stream it on Discord. We just got through all 3 of the tornado video classics from Grzoulis. And I'm sitting there, awesome.
That's some quality material right there.
Absolutely. The music alone, I'm like, oh man, I should use this music for my podcast.
So
But,
you're rolling Twister next, right? I mean,
we've
come
done
on.
Twister. That was
Okay,
number
good.
one. Yep.
Okay,
We did
all right.
Twister. So we stream it, and then we can run a separate chat and the commentary. It's hilarious.
There was
So it's
a handful of Mets that actually did a Twister playing on Friday night. Everybody
I
hit
saw
play
that.
on the DVD player right at the same time, and then they live tweeted it as if it was on A&E, and it was great. I mean, that never gets old. I do that. You do that once a week in this group, and we'd be fine with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they know every line and is awesome. So it's been fun for me.
It's really interesting to see. I don't know if you've watched the PBS series that started on Masterpiece Theater last night, World on Fire. It's outstanding. But Helen Hunt is one of the heroines in the story, and she's like our age now. It's like, oh man, I remember when. But so I know we want to get into the tornadoes, Jen, because we do have a hard out tonight. So you're going to walk us through 10 outbreaks, and we're going to share stories when you do. So we'll try to be mindful of time. But you kind of lead us in and
Okay.
tell us a little bit about an outbreak, and then I'm sure a lot of us are going to have a lot of great input.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll kind of do the quick synopsis and then we can all kind of join in. And I'm actually going to share my screen too, because I have images for each outbreak, but we picked the top 10 most memorable April tornado outbreaks. If we went through every single note, it would take 5 hours to get through, because Bill and I put that together and we just went nuts. That's why we're like two peas in a pod here with our love for history. But the first outbreak we're going to look at is the April 5th and 6th, 1936 Tupelo and Gainesville tornadoes. There was actually 17 total tornadoes across 6 states. And the map I'm showing here actually shows the location. This is from the monthly weather review from that year. Shows you all the tornadoes that hit during that two-day period. The Tupelo tornado actually hit during April 5th in the evening. And I found out that was actually a Palm Sunday. I did not know that. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the most devastating tornadoes. It's actually the 4th deadliest tornado in U.S. history. And there is dispute on the fatality count. Officially, it's 216 killed. The Mississippi State geologist at the time actually had 233 in his bulletin. But during that time, even for both of those totals, many of the injured, there were still many injured at that time, including African-American injuries, and a lot of those were not recorded. And so we don't know their fate. And then there was a horrible event that happened in the Gum Pond area where the houses there, and that was an African-American community. They were all swept into the pond, and it's unknown if they were able to get all of the bodies out of the pond. And so I think the fatality list is probably much, much higher, but officially it's 216. And there was, I get on newspapers.com, which is the best resource for historians. Mr. J.P. Burrow and his wife and 11 kids were all killed by this tornado. The one of the most famous survivors was Elvis Presley. He was 15 months old.
I went back and looked at the weather maps from that morning, and of course, you know, it's rudimentary data, but it's interesting. Only a 998 millibar low east of Oklahoma City. It was tracking southeast. Jen, I don't know if you paid attention to that or not, but like that morning, it was 50 at Birmingham. It was 70 in Oxford, Mississippi. And in Vicksburg, it was 70 and 26 degrees warmer than the day before. They had thunderstorms at Montgomery. So there must have been a warm front coming north. But we were only at 50 degrees in Birmingham early that same morning. And it looks like there was an outbreak the earlier that same week by your map there. Through southern Georgia into South Carolina. Yeah.
Second and third, the Greensboro, North Carolina was hit by a significant tornado. I want to say the rating was F4, and that was around the 3rd. So yeah, that was extremely busy time, and a busy time in America, Bill.
Yeah.
1936.
I'm always fascinated with that 32 there was a great comedian, I think John Mulvaney said the other day, what is it about dads that study World War II all the time? They sit in the back like they're going to have a pop quiz on, World War II tomorrow. And if, on Jeopardy, if they ever get asked about the League of Nations, they're going to win the $90,000. But you know, that really was a traumatic time in American history. You know, the
Mhm.
Italians and the Germans were doing all their crazy things. And I thought it was interesting that Hoover was still striking out at FDR. Headline in the paper that day from Nashville was that he said that the New Deal was the foe of freedom. So I guess we had political controversy even back then in the Depression.
Yes. We've had it since the beginning of time, I think. So that just real quick on the next tornado, which hit the Gainesville area, I'm going to pull up a picture for that one as well. But this one, pretty much just as horrific as what happened in Tupelo. There were possibility of 2 or 3 tornadoes that struck Gainesville at the same time. I kind of delved into that a little bit. I was more convinced that there were 2 that hit at the same time. 1,600 injuries. This is per Thomas Gruzoulis, and significant tornadoes, 203 fatalities, 7-mile path there. It was rated later F4. And according to Gruzoulis, he quoted that the wreckage was astounding, with debris filling the streets up to 10 feet deep. And one of the more horrific things that occurred here was at the Cooper Pants Company. It's the largest death toll in a single building for any U.S. tornado. There were 60 workers that were killed, and some were young women and children. They had gone to the basement as they were supposed to, but the weakened building collapsed, and then it caught on fire. And so this is the image. It's an aerial photograph of the fire on top of that building. And so it was just, a compounded tragedy here for that. And another discrepancy, or possibly on the death toll, that there were still 40 people missing when they came up with the original 203 death toll. So these events are just so tragic. And I think there were 4 tornadoes, Bill, in Alabama, per that map.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it kind of hopped over our state, but there was a substantial set of tornadoes through our northwestern part of Alabama.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's that. You ready to move on? Palm Sunday.
You're in charge.
I'm in charge. Oh, I'm in charge.
We're in charge of adding stories where we get
okay.
a chance.
Well, this works.
James, you got some stories from that 1936 tornado? You remember that one?
I was just starting my television weather career, and it was a great year. I was young, had hair, and I was a good-looking guy. So there you go.
That's awesome. All right, 1965, April 11th, Palm Sunday outbreak. I actually have a personal connection to this. I was not born yet, but I do have a personal connection. I have a summary on the website, and on the Rocheville-Kokomo tornado. My great uncle actually was caught up in this tornado. So I wanted to read what he wrote about this. He goes, "We were on the 31 bypass just north of the Chrysler plant in Kokomo, and the tornado put us on the median. We were between the center tornado and the tail of the other one. I was in the front seat. Something went through the window. Glass pelted our faces and head. Glass was in our hair. Looked like the car had been sandblasted. Then we drove to the hospital at the south end of Kokomo. Cars were upside down, laying on top of buildings. Weird. When we drove home through Rocheville, there was straw through light poles, something you never forget." And so he sent that to me about a year or so ago, and he was with my great-grandparents. But couple of details on this one. Officially called the second Palm Sunday tornado outbreak. The first, of course, 1920, and then the third in 1994. 260 plus fatalities, at least 40 tornadoes across the Great Lakes region, and 17 or more. There's still a few discrepancies there, but at least 17 were rated F4 later. And it was the worst outbreak in Indiana's history. And Bill, you have a couple of memories on this?
Yeah, I threw in there that is my earliest recollected memory of a tornado, because I remember I would have been 3.5 years old, but I remember those news reports on the radio and being, struck by that. And I think that had some formative part of my, interest in weather for sure. And I'm sure you're going to show, there's the famous photo that haunts me to this day. And now we know that that's not a totally, rare occurrence. It's still rare, but that does happen. And I thought that was some kind of unworldly event right there when I saw that picture.
Yeah. It's in the Dunlap, Indiana area. That's just, and the F4 ratings on those suckers. So
does it become an F8 if there's 2 of them like that?
If there's, I don't think so. We could probably have a discussion on that on our Discord channel, though.
I want to know one thing. You mentioned
yeah.
all the people you had on your Tornado Talk podcast. Tell me you never had Tom Grisoulas, because Nate's never been able to get Tom to be on the show.
I have never had Grisoulas.
Okay.
I have
All right.
talked
We
to him
don't
on the
feel so
phone,
bad,
though. Yeah, I did talk to him on the phone, and he's amazing. I think he's wonderful. And if he only knew how many of these young whippersnappers want his new books. They love them. They all have his older books, and they all want the new ones. So I think he's going to be great when he gets those out with the Kickstarter program. I know he's working on them to just try to fine tune everything. But yeah, there's so many of these kids that really want his books. All right, let's zoom on real quick over to April 21st, 1967. And the highlighted tornado here, actually, there's three. They were all in the northern Chicago, northern Illinois area. Oak Lawn, Belvedere, Lake Zurich. This was the event that triggered Tim Marshall to want to get involved in tornadoes and research and engineering. So this triggered it. His hometown is Oak Lawn. And we interviewed him for the podcast, and he talked about he was already interested in science and doing weather observations as a kid. And he said he was, he'd asked his parents all about tornadoes and what have you, and he was taking observations. And then all of this happened in his hometown. And then after that, it just led him to his career, all of his curiosity in that. But for this entire outbreak, there were 46 tornadoes. 5 were rated F4. The 3 in Illinois that I just mentioned were all F4s, 1 in Michigan and 1 in Missouri. The Belvedere, I would like to dig into this event a little bit more, but there was the timing was horrible because it happened right when school was letting out. And so Belvedere High School, the buses had already picked up some of the kids. They had picked up the elementary school kids, were loading the high school students, and the tornado hit, and 12 buses were rolled over. And the students were flung out of the buses. And so there were 13 of 24 fatalities in Belvedere were the students. And so according to Grisoulas, this was the nation's 6th worst school death toll from a tornado. In the Lake Zurich area, which is the next one that hits, there was 1 fatality. It was a quick 4-mile path, but it was a very large tornado. And then Oak Lawn, it went right through downtown Oak Lawn, and there were 33 that were killed. And that was one of the stories we told in one of our archive podcasts. And we were able to actually talk to folks who survived that event and just gave details on where it went. It hit a movie theater and went right through downtown during evening traffic, people going home.
I think we've had people on the show talk about that, getting their interest started in weather. James, you remember any of those people that? I know we've had multiple guests say that influenced them at somewhere along the way. What, 1967, Jen, is that right?
Yeah, April 21st.
Wow.
This is the Oak Lawn tornado here.
Especially Tim Marshall. He's probably one of the ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the tornado. Wow. Impressive.
Yeah. All right, Bill, I'm going to have you go into Sherwood Shores. This is April 17th and 18th. You had some interesting stories here that you were.
Well, you threw that up there as an April tornado, and I thought it was interesting because Al Moeller told me this story one year when I was out in Oklahoma or somewhere. We ran into each other at the National Severe Storms Conference or something. But, there was a very strong upper level low, on the morning of Friday, April 17th. It was moving into California, a big trough developing over the Southern Plains. And in Lubbock, they knew it was going to be a bad night. The meteorologist that was on duty at the time was a gentleman, named Johnny Gray. And, in the story in the notes that I took from Al, he saw this tornado going toward the town of Whiteface, and the first number on his index card for Whiteface, he dialed it and got a recording that the number was not in service. He dialed the second number and got the same recording. He knew that, they were in trouble because he couldn't reach them. In that town, the high school senior class was performing their play, which was called Lights Out, amazingly. But at 8:50, as the performance was underway, the familiar sound of the tornado and the powerful suction began to take people's breath away, and then the lights went out and the windows crashed in. They had no warning. 30 people were hurt at the school that night. It went on to Whitehall. It destroyed the high school gym there where a volleyball game was being played. They were evacuated in time, which was great. There was another tornado to the northwest that produced one fatality in a community there. So Lubbock at that time had 2 tornadic supercells going on. The second one will produce tornadoes all the way to Pampa, up in the Panhandle. But this was a busy, crazy night. And to the south of Pampa, there was a trailer park called Sherwood Shores. Beautiful spot on a reservoir. About 150 people, were there that night. Many had gone to bed. Some had been tracking the tornadoes on the radio, and been paying attention to it. But when that tornado was over, the Lubbock Weather Service issued an all clear. My point of asking this, Al, about this tornado was, tell me your, kind of the storm that you think was, you're the one that you learned the most from. And he mentioned this one because, later that evening, the atmosphere appeared to be stabilizing. The event seemed to be over. Lots of people went to bed. But then this tornado sort of came out of nowhere. And then, it struck the Sherwood Shores mobile home park. 12 people died there. One child died later. 35 people were injured. 172 mobile homes were destroyed. Only one remained in the entire community. And I think there were 1,000 mobile homes in the entire thing, is what my notes say.
Yeah.
But it was just a terrible, terrible night. 23 people died in that outbreak. So that's always, not one that we hear about, not one that we think about, but it certainly was one that stuck with Al Mohler.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the photo I have had up here, that it's hard to see a little bit. This is a newspaper clip of Sherwood Shores, and it says, little to be recognized. And the vice president said that only one remained in the entire community. That may have been it. And it's just these type of events. I mean, there's so many different things that are tragic, but this really struck with me as well. Just the devastation to this little mobile home park. So thank you for sharing that. All right, we're going to zoom over to a big one, to April 3rd. We just had this anniversary, 1974. And so let me, we're going to get James talking here. We're going to talk, let me give you the overview. 148 twisters in 24 hours, 95 F2 or stronger, 30 were F4 or F5. And there were 15 tornadoes occurring simultaneously at the height of the event, over 2,500 miles of damage path, 335 fatalities, and over 6,000 injuries. And the picture I'm going to pull up here is actually Fujita's map, which is an amazing map. Kind of zoom in here just a little bit. That's about as good as I can do, but I posted this the other day on social media, and Tim Marshall's like, "Oh, had that on my wall." So,
I did too.
Yeah.
They had 2 of them at the Weather Service in Birmingham, and they gave me one, and I treasured it.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? What do you want to add on this
first
one?
off, Bill, we need to remind people, we actually, didn't we recreate this night on the show?
There's a great show where we took all the important, warnings from that day, and some of them are read by JB. And they're just phenomenal. They'll make the hair stand up. Even if you don't have any hair like me, it'll make the hair stand up on the back of your neck.
Yeah, I need to dig up the number of that show, but and again, JB Elliott, we have a lot of new listeners. JB was part of this show for a long time. He passed away a few years ago, but JB worked at the National Weather Service in Birmingham for years and years and years. And he was on duty that night.
Yeah, James, I don't know if he told this story ever, because he told it to me one Sunday. I just went over and just listened to him and wrote some of these things down. He had worked the night before. I don't know if you knew that, James. He had worked the midnight shift on April 2nd into early April 3rd. And they were scrambling that morning of April 3rd to get the zone forecasts out. And it was a rapidly developing situation. And, he left at 8 o'clock and went home. He lived out in Huffman in Birmingham. There was a Food World out there. He stopped in the Food World, and the lady made some comment to him about it was going to be a nice day or something to that effect. And he told her, he said, "Lady, you have no idea what's coming." And they called him back in about 1 o'clock, and he was there for a lot of those warnings, working with Jay Shelley. One of them, James, I don't know if you remember, but they issued a tornado warning this was the quote, back then it was county based. They issued a tornado warning for the northwestern quarter of Alabama. That's exactly what the warning said. It said, if you are near a thunderstorm tonight, assume it has a tornado in it and take cover. And that stuff just chilled me.
That's not a bad way to handle it back in those days. You think about the technology and that RATS machine and the radar. And again, I don't want to get bogged down in this. In fact, I want to say, didn't we have an episode with Jay Shelley on WeatherBrains?
We had Bob.
We've done multiple shows on that outbreak, Jen. And sorry to take away from your time here.
Well,
but,
something we hadn't talked about, James, was the importance of the Skywarn map on the Today Show. I watched that religiously.
Frank Blair
morning, and I woke up that morning, and I literally nearly had a heart attack when I saw that outlook. And it's still, they rarely issued those scattered designations. They were 31 to 45%. I think Corfiti said they've never issued the one that was greater than that. But that day was a 31 to 45% risk. And it was just about as beautiful an outlook as you could draw. And it probably saved a lot of lives.
And I was a senior in high school. And, most people, they're going to the prom and they're doing all their parties and socializing. I am a social zero. I was then, and I still am today. So I've never been to a prom. I've never been to a homecoming dance. I worked. I just worked. And I really had to work, but I worked. And I worked at a rock and roll radio station playing rock and roll music. And that night, and my hobby was ham radio. And that night there was an urgent call for volunteers to go north. Tuscaloosa was not hit that night, which is odd because typically they are. But I said, I'll be glad to go. So they sent me north to a town called Jasper, Alabama, which is about 40 miles north of Tuscaloosa. And there was a police escort. And understand, downtown Jasper took a direct hit from an F4. This was bad. I mean, it was bad. And they put me and my ham radio gear in the hospital in that small town. It was called the People's Hospital, and I set up my radio gear. And for some reason, they put me in the emergency room. And I was so busy getting antennas ready and stringing, feed line and getting the link established to Birmingham. I wasn't really paying attention. But once we got everything established and the ER personnel could speak with the relief agencies in Birmingham, I stepped back and I opened my eyes. And the stuff I saw, I was 17 at the time. A 17-year-old, they don't need to be seeing that. And nobody needs to be seeing that. And I had night terrors for years where I would wake up in a cold sweat. And I've not talked about it publicly or privately, and I never will. But that was a life changer for me. So that's the main thing for me. You bring up that event. That changed my life. And I guess I had to experience that to do what I do for a living today.
Mm-hmm.
So it affected so many people of my generation, getting them into weather. I can't tell you how many meteorologists and researchers we have that came about as a result of growing up in that 1974 outbreak. So sorry, Jen.
I love hearing it. No. This is all about sharing stories. And Bill, you're going to share a story real quick.
You saw this book at some point in your life, right, James, that pharmacist in Moulton did?
Yep, in Lawrence County, yeah.
250 eyewitness accounts that he recorded verbatim. I'm just going to read a little bit from one lady. I'm Mrs. Mary Quillion, and I'm about to share my view on what happened on the 3rd of April, 1974. We got up early that morning. The wind was high, the highest and strongest I ever remember in my life. I was outside setting out strawberries when my 5-year-old little boy, Chris, was inside the house toting water for me. He told his granny as he looked out at the sky, "Granny, there's going to be a storm and it's going to kill Mama." We were nervous all day. Then late that evening, we were preparing supper. My mother-in-law had been nervous of clouds, was watching and listening to the storm warnings on the television, watching the clouds. We heard about the storm near Moulton. We went and got into the utility room, and, it goes on to tell the story about the Letsons and people that died. But, it's just a fascinating story. These people, knew that day, that something terrible was going to happen. And there are multiple, stories in there about that. But warnings did save lives, believe it or not, that day. These people are storm savvy in Alabama. They were back then, and probably a lot because that 1936 and other tornadoes that have come through there, Jen. But those stories still just haunt me to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. Well, Bill, I'm going to let you keep talking here. We'll do a quick overview of the next event. What is our hard out time, by the way?
Probably
out is
9:35
minutes
maybe.
after.
Oh, 9:30. We better hurry. We got a lot to do.
No, not 9:45.
But we still got to do.
Time.
We still got to do the recorded. I mean, not recorded, but AJ.
Right. Tony Rice he could not produce an astronomy report this week, so we got AJ coming on with us, and then that should be the only thing. Well, and we can postpone the email inbox until next week and the other stuff. We'll still do picks of the week though. Got to do picks of the week
on April 4th, 1977. James, another day that you remember extremely well. Jen picked that day. She had us in mind, but I was the only kid at Huffman High School that had a weather radio. And that day I was a freshman, and I carried it around because
that means you were a social zero too. I
was totally a social zero. But I went up to my social studies teacher at 2:00 and said, "Look, we gotta get a message to the administration, that this storm means business." And they issued a tornado warning shortly thereafter. She told me go sit down, and I watched that storm out the back window of my civics class. It passed about 5 miles west of where we were, and they sounded the tornado bell right when we got out of school and we went downstairs. But when I got to the car that afternoon, I thought that was interesting. James, you'll remember this. When I Need You. Who sang that, James? 1977.
Leo Sayer.
Very good. I will never forget that song because it was pouring down rain, the wind was blowing, and we still didn't have any idea what had happened, but it became apparent through the day. James, do you remember the lady that got killed at Riddle's Bend up on the St. Clair County Etowah border?
I can't recall the name. No.
She was in a storm shelter. She left a home that was undamaged by the tornado, and a tree fell on her storm shelter, and she was killed. And that's always been a terrible thing to me. But the other thing that happened that day, and some of the newspapers carried this as the headline above, even newspapers in Alabama, Jen, you probably noticed this, was that the Southern Airways
crash.
DC-9 went down. And that was a situation where there just wasn't enough information, and they flew into a storm they should have never been anywhere near. Nate, you got any recollection of that storm or that?
He wasn't even alive back then.
Well, I bet he's looked at it though, because that was a terrible plane crash.
No.
Yeah, that's Smithfield right there. JB probably took that picture.
Yeah, that's
right. These photographs are from JB Elliott, our longtime WeatherBrains associate and friend and mentor. He took some remarkable images of the damage at Smithfield Estates, which is just west of Interstate 65. And he took them from the air and from the ground. In fact, if you see any of these images floating around, most likely they're JB's.
Yeah, that was.
But that again, I was not directly involved in it that day. Again, I was in Tuscaloosa and I was working, and of course I was aware of it. But what was stunning was that Southern Airways, crash that happened. I mean, it was so bad that the death toll kept climbing from Birmingham. Then all of a sudden, more news. We got a passenger jet that's crashed in Northwest Georgia that was on the way from Muscle Shoals to Atlanta. And apparently the plane flew right into a severe storm. It ingested a bunch of hail, and it was just, just a horrible, horrible day. This first week of April is just every day. There's just these big anniversaries like this. Yeah. It's just horrible.
Yeah. There's so many.
Hey, Jen, why don't we skip forward to, since we probably run a little late on time. I know James had a lot of involvement, of course, in the 1998 tornado. So James, we're unfortunately on a bad list here, but let's go back to that April 8th, 1998 outbreak for a minute,
Grove.
James, and talk about Oak Grove. James, you want to talk about that for a second?
Well, that was an EF5 that came through the Birmingham metro area. Some of the suburbs hit were Rock Creek, Oak Grove, Sylvan Springs, McDonald Chapel, Pratt City, Edgewater. 32 people died in Birmingham. We had 2 more deaths from another tornado that dropped out of the parent storm east of the city. The warnings were good. This was at night. Not one single image of that EF5 tornado. This was in darkness. All you could see on the cameras that night were the power grids and power flashes, the power going out. But That was the first night we did weather the way I wanted to do weather all my life. They gave me freedom to be me. I didn't have to go back to programming. I didn't have to do anything. They said, you've got full control. So we stayed on television from 6 o'clock until midnight that night. And I knew this is the way we'll be doing tornado warnings forever, because it worked and people appreciated that. But the next morning, they asked me to fly in the helicopter at the first light of day. Nobody knew how bad it was. You don't know in darkness. So first light of day, the next morning after taking a nap, we got in that helicopter and we went out to Oak Grove High School, which was the first landmark. I said, let's go out there, because I do schools. I knew that school building. And I mean, it was gone. And you could hear jaws dropping collectively as we beam back these live images flying down that path. And, I said from the air, and Brian Peters always fusses at me. He said, you shouldn't be saying that. I said, man, this sure looks like EF5 damage down there. And as it turns out, it was. And Brian was part of the team that rated that an EF5. And, in some cases, people heard the warning and they did the right thing, but there was nothing they could do. It was their day. But 32 precious people died out there. And that was a night that we will never, ever, ever forget. They had the sweetest 20th anniversary ceremony at Oak Grove School, the new school, a couple of years ago for that. It was very special. They did a great job with that.
What were you thinking, James, when you were watching that storm live and real? I mean, I was watching it, seeing almost like, I think, a donut hole at one point in the reflectivity. I think I saw.
Oh yeah, you had everything. The debris ball. You had the whole thing. You knew that this was bad, and I have never been one to get focused on the magnitude or the history of the day. You're working an EF5 tornado. How many of these things will you work in your career? Not many. You better be good. You better be at the top of your game. I don't have time to process that. Even back then, we didn't have Facebag and the tweeter and Weather Service chat and all this stuff that we imagine. All the information we have. We didn't have that back in 1998. What do you think we had that night? Ham radio. We're going to save the world one day. Everybody mocks ham radio operators. Let me tell you what, your fancy little iPhone or your Android phone, guess what? One day you're going to pick that thing up and it's not going to work. You have no coverage. You have no ability to communicate, and you're going to freak. And you're going to flock to some ham radio guy's house to desperately establish these communication lines that you need. But that night we had all the local repeaters in the office cranked up, and the stuff we were hearing was it was bad. So, and I think of my friend Matthew Seals, his 8-year-old son Nathan was killed. The whole family was lofted, the whole family. And if Nathan would have had a bicycle helmet on, or his batting helmet, the kid played baseball, youth baseball, he'd be alive today. And every time we push helmets, part of that goes back to Nathan Seals. We do that to honor his memory. And, that's just a reminder that you got to wear a helmet. You've got to wear a helmet. We have to do a better job of communicating that. The other family members of the Seals family, they survived, and they were all injured. Matthew, the dad, is in a wheelchair. He has a broken back. But that funeral was so hard. They had to bring in the family members, and they were in bad shape, but they wanted to be there for that funeral. The mom was severely injured, and Matthew was hurt bad, and 2 siblings were hurt bad. They were all lofted by an EF5 in Rock Creek. So just another day of the storms of April. It's happened before. It's going to happen again.
Third deadliest tornado since 1950 in Alabama. I thought that still stands at this point, even after April 27th.
Yeah. It was rough. And again, the warning process worked well, I thought, that night. The warnings were timely. They were communicated. And again, back then, all the other stations, and I'm not knocking any meteorologists. They couldn't do it. I couldn't do it when I worked for another channel. They all went back to Freak of the Week, or, women who name their butt cheeks, or whatever programs on television, which is, I literally cut off some show called the Ricky Lake Show, and that was the episode, women who named their butt cheeks. Thinking, well, who in their right mind would be watching this stuff, But, they do a little weather, they go back to the Freak of the Week, they do a little weather, go back to Freak of the Week, where we just stayed on the whole time. And that's the way you got to do this stuff. And, the wasn't Netflix back in 1990. Everybody watched the networks. I mean, everybody was watching back then. And so TV grew up that night, and the warning process grew up that night, and I grew up that night. A lot of people grew up that night.
Well, Jen, you've talked about tornado outbreaks around the country. It's become kind of Alabama-centric here, but there's a reason for that. Out of all these major tornado outbreaks in April, a large percentage of them end up in Alabama. And of course, we know about the Mac Daddy of our generation. James and I went through 1974, but then we went through it again in 2011. Take us through that one real quick. We'll share some stories before we switch out of this mode.
Yeah. April 27th, really the outbreak could start the 25th through the 28th. Do you guys know the official tornado count from the outbreak? I've seen different totals. Is it 350?
Alabama was 62. I don't know the national number.
Okay.
I do not know.
Okay.
There were 200 something that day in the United States.
And over the whole outbreak, I believe there was 350 for, if you're looking at the 25th through the 28th. Yeah, the whole expanse. But Alabama was the hardest hit that day. 251 fatalities, total of 62 tornadoes hit, 29 in the Birmingham National Weather Service county area.
11 violent tornadoes in Alabama.
Yeah. And that, Alabama is just the highlight of many of these outbreaks in April. And it is the 5th deadliest tornado day in U.S. history, the 4th deadliest outbreak in U.S. history, $10 billion in damage. You have 336. So I've seen so many different totals, but I think 336 is what several areas talk about here. And then you have a few interesting things here, Bill, about some records from the Dixie outbreak of 2011. 2nd deadliest Alabama outbreak behind 1932, 5th deadliest U.S. outbreak. There were 5 violent tornado tracks of 70 miles or greater just in Alabama. So what are some things you guys want to share from your experience that day?
Well, for me, it was, just working it, because I worked the event the night before because we had we knew we were going to have severe weather overnight into the early morning hours, and we did. And it was more potent than we thought it would be. We had a lot of damage in the Birmingham metro area. James will want to talk about that, I'm sure. Then there were additional tornadoes around lunchtime, and then the real event started, mid-afternoon. When we saw that tornado on the webcam from, Coleman, we knew then this was going to be big. James, you take it from there.
Yeah, and listen, I didn't expect that morning event to be anything like that. That was rough. We had a pre-dawn episode that knocked out power to 250,000 people here, and that affected our ability to reach people with the big event later in the day. But you had loss of life, you had just incredible damage, and then you had a lull for some, not for all, but for some. And everybody's saying, "Oh, those nitwits! We've already had the bad weather. The sun's out. It's a beautiful day." We had to fight that problem, and but it gave us a little time to restore some equipment that was down, cameras that were down, internet, outages. We had microwave paths that were down, and those engineers did a stunning job of getting some of that stuff back online. And the Coleman tornado talked to us. It was telling us a story. If you're willing to listen, the atmosphere will talk to you. It will tell you a story. Typically early in the event about what's going to happen. And it was certainly telling us what was to come. And that Coleman tornado, the first of the afternoon, was an EF4 and came through a town of 20,000 people. Nobody died. We thought, okay, this is going to work. The warning process, we're hampered by all these power outages and everything else. But after that, it was like bullets from Hades. It was horrible. And we had 62 tornadoes. And the thing I regret, Jen, is not being able to tell all these stories. Everybody talks about the Tuscaloosa tornado, and everybody talks about the Birmingham tornado and the Coleman tornado because those were population centers. But who's talking about Sawyerville? Who even knows where that is? The people that live there, are their lives any less important because they live in a rural part of the state? That really ticks me off. And I'm mad at me. We just don't have the resources, the people to do this. But I'm hoping on the 10th anniversary next year, we can tell some of the stories that were never, ever, 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 ever told. But, it was generational, and we failed. It was our finest moment. It was our worst moment. 252 people died on our watch. How do you call that a success? And look, there's going to be loss of life. There will be loss of life with every big event like that. We know that. We're not stupid. But there's no way. I thought the death toll should have been about 30. 30 people heard the warning. They responded, and it was just their day. These were EF4s and EF5s. They had no chance, even with good, adequate warning. But my position is 222 people ought to be walking around today, listening to this show right now, being on this show. And, and I was so, it just seemed like at first people in the weather, and not everybody, but some people, oh, we saved lives. We were good. Well, maybe we sucked. All these people died. And I know, we didn't suck. It was okay. It was our finest moment. It was our worst moment. But I think, Jen, that was the event where we cried out for help. And that's when the relationship with social scientists started. The first person to call me, guess who it was? It represented social science, Kim Cloco. I'll never forget that. And she wanted to come by and talk to me. And I said, please do. You're going to be like a counselor. I'm warning you. You are going to be like, I need to sit on your couch and just talk, and you're going to help me. And she did. And so that was great that it opened up that relationship, in that what we know is physical science. That's not enough. It's not enough. And so it's opened the door for an interdisciplinary approach to this stuff. And I think we'll be better the next time we have a day like that. Sorry, I'm talking. I sound like a preacher.
No, we
It's
love it.
important.
We're wrapped with attention. And admit the person who's trying to get into the show there, James.
Yeah. Well, and what you said, James, in terms of there's these communities that we don't know their story, that is exactly what Tornado Talk is about, because I want to tell these stories. And almost every event there's tragedy with every event. People have lost their home or their farm, or they've lost their family members and their friends or whatever. But there's also these stories of community rebuilding, and it's telling those stories. And especially in the time that we're living right now, where all of us are affected by the pandemic, people have lived through stuff for hundreds of years, and they've rebuilt and they've come together. And it's the community that I want to focus in on when I tell these stories on Tornado Talk. I always try to find some kind of a story in the newspapers that highlights something about how they rebuilt their city or their town, or, folks came together to help families or whatever it was. So I like to tell those stories about the different communities that are hit.
Yeah. And I can't wait for some of us to do that. And I want to do that next year. It's going to be 10 years next year.
Yeah.
I'm already in my mind thinking of ways we can honor those that died. And I don't want their memory just to go away, and ways that we can celebrate those that lived. I'm very guilty about not doing that, and do it in a very tasteful way. So we've got a year to figure that out. In fact, I was hoping to get working on it this month, but ain't nobody working on nothing this month. I'm holed up in my beach house back here. So
yeah, I like that. Well, Jen, thank you for walking us through this.
Guys, thank you so much.
It's some amazing stories, and we appreciate you taking us through that. So, James, if it's okay with you, I'm going to introduce AJ. I know we're out here at 9:45 tonight, but we're, as always, excited about having Trade Weather as a sponsor of the show. And each week at this time, AJ Grossbart joins us from CX Futures to talk about some of the more interesting weather markets coming up in the next 7 days. First, how are you? How is New York City? AJ, now, if we look at it, it says AJ. I thought it was going to say Amanda something, but you must have changed.
Yeah, I use my girlfriend's Zoom account.
When I saw Amanda's name coming in, AJ, I thought it was one of these nude. Because really, Zoom has had this problem with people joining these conferences and they're not wearing any clothes. I'm thinking, and Bill said, "Well, go ahead and let her in."
Well, there you go.
Right when I was waiting, I knew to email Bill. I was like, all right, I definitely have to let him know that this is actually me and not someone else trying to join in. I've been reading about that. People are joining in. They're calling it Zooming or something. I forgot the phrase they're using.
Zoom bombing. Zoom
bombing. Yes. So I'm not Zoom bombing. I'm here.
Well, are you well and everything's going okay in New York City? I mean, it's obviously terrible, but it seems like maybe there's a little hope today that the curve may have turned slightly?
I saw that the numbers are going down. It was beautiful weather outside. I actually did leave the apartment for a little bit today. Just trying to stay sane, stay safe and healthy. And so far, I'm personally okay. My family's okay, which is important. I know there's a lot of people struggling right now. But it's hopefully we're seeing a turnaround for the better now.
Let's hope so. So take us real quickly through the program and then tell us about the weather markets that are interesting in the coming 7 days.
Yeah, definitely. So for the WeatherBrains audience, if anyone's looking for something new to learn and explore, Trade Weather is a great marketplace for this audience to get involved in. We're fully licensed and regulated to allow you to forecast daily rainfall, snowfall amounts, as well as high temperature and low temperature for 86 cities across the US. The main market we're seeing increased activity in is the high temperature market for Miami, Florida on Friday. Miami is currently forecasted to be the hottest city in the country, and traders are taking notice. Current forecasts range from 81 degrees to 93 degrees, with the most amount of forecasts taking place at 88 degrees. There's already been $1,100 traded in this market, and you have until Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern to make your forecast. Another interesting temperature market that is taking place is in Las Vegas in Friday, April 10th. And Las Vegas is expected to be colder than normal, with forecasts ranging from 46 degrees to 59 degrees. And currently the most traded temperature is 54 degrees. And the total amount of money traded at the time we are filming this podcast is just over $800. So like the Miami trade I mentioned before, you have until Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern to make your forecast. And I chose 2 Friday trades so that the WeatherBrains audience has ample time to set up their account on the Trade Weather homepage. Simply head over to tradeweather.com and click on the apply button on the top right-hand corner. Once finished, you'll receive $10 in trading credit. And then give us some feedback by taking our survey on the tradeweather.com homepage. And we'll give you an additional $25 in trading credit to use on these trades or any other markets that interest you. And lastly, just want to mention, it's been great communicating with some of the WeatherBrains audience that has actually signed up and created accounts with Trade Weather. So don't hesitate ever to call or email me if you have any questions. Myself and my team are happy to help, and I look forward to speaking with a few of you further.
Well, thank you so much, AJ. Y'all stay safe, stay well, stick around to the end of the show, but we'll definitely talk to you next week. So James,
so let again, Tony does not have a report this week, so let's go right into picks of the week. This is where we go around the horn. Everybody shares something that is related to weather. And Nate, my pick involves one of your guys here. NBC Connecticut. You ever been to NBC Connecticut?
I have. Beautiful West Hartford, Connecticut.
They did a piece on how U.S. weather modeling could be struggling because of the lack of upper air data from commercial aircraft.
Yep. Interviewed the chief of the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting for that story.
Ooh, the good old EC. But anyway, that was very well done. And I'm believing it. Goodness, this week, I mean, you talk about model madness. Goodness gracious. It is, it's about as clear as mud here the next 5 days here. So I clearly think that's got something to do with it. So let's see, Aubrey, we'll do a double email next week. Let's just do picks of the week. Aubrey, what you got for us this week?
That's fine. So mine is following USGS volcanoes on Twitter with some of the recent activity out west. They've got some great weekly updates, and they have a geologist, I believe he's a geologist, their head of the volcano at Yellowstone, who really kind of talks about why these aren't tied to Yellowstone and what they actually are and are from, and just good source information about the earthquakes and following Yellowstone volcanoes.
I love geology. I need to learn more. We're supposed to be the station's scientist and well-rounded, and I feel like I need to brush up on my geography skills, not geography, geology skills.
I feel like I need to brush up on a lot of that stuff. So.
Yeah.
Wonder if we could find a little.
I'm okay with geography in the United States, but geology a little shaky sometimes. But no, that's a great pick. So thanks, Aubrey. All right, Nate, what you got? I know you got something good.
So Mike Silfer, a meteorologist on television in Maine, shot a tease, one of these little teasers that we say sometimes to try and get people to watch their newscast. And he had a furry friend join him with impeccable timing. You've got to click the link. And we need to get this dog a contract stat, because you can't teach timing like this. Check it out.
Cute.
Awesome. All right. So let's go. Jen, what you got for us this week?
Well, I'm going to have you guys go to Tornado Talk, but here's why. 2 reasons. If you go all the way to the bottom of our homepage, you can see the link to our Discord server. That's probably the best way for you to just go ahead and click on that. That will take you right over if you guys want to join our community and talk. And then while you're on there, check out our Tornadoes of 2020. I would like to give Aubrey kudos for getting us going on that project, because she threw out on Twitter, can we get
Massive
away?
frustration.
Yeah, how do we find these events that have occurred? So I threw my kids on there and they put it together, and I created some space on the website, and it's interactive, and you can see how many we've entered, over 200 tornadoes so far for this year. And you can find all the public information statements, images, some radar and YouTube and all that. So you can kind of follow along with what we're doing. So I still have a few to add, but we try to update it about once or twice a week.
And that's a great set. That's a great resource. And I'm just not saying that because Jen's on the show, but that is a great resource, Tornado
Thank
Talk.
you.
All right, AJ, give us something good.
Something good is tradeweather.com, but other than that,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's good enough. That'll work.
we
That's
could
all.
do
That's
that.
all you need. No, listen, there's a lot of people hanging around looking for things to do. I mean, people have time on their hands, and that's a
Definitely.
fascinating thing to do over there. So yeah, go to tradeweather.com and just dip your toe in, and I think you'll find that fascinating. All right, Bill Murray, what you got for us?
Yeah, James, we thank AJ and the folks at CX Futures and Trade Weather for being a sponsor. Also, Highway Weather, Devin Stormont, he's got that really cool travel weather app, for road trips. You can pick your route, get an hourly forecast along the way, anywhere from, Miami to Seattle. And it tells you what the weather's going to be when you are supposed to arrive at that location. So it really allows you to cover a lot of ground.
Does it account for your lead foot?
Well, you have to
say it's
adjust
hour
the
by hour.
slider.
Yeah.
You have to adjust the slider there, Nate. For James, it's like you move it over to 80. And
Is it going to affect my safe driving discount?
well, it does. It does talk to those folks over there, so be careful. and you can plan your stops along the way. Now you don't want to stop. You want a 20-gallon gas can in your back tank. Drive all the way through. But you can adjust your departure time. You can put in your endpoints, choose your route, and then ask it when's the best time to go. But arrive safely with Highway Weather. 60,000 users won't steer you wrong. Just go to highwayweather.io for more information. You can get it for iOS and for Android. And next week, James, schools are kind of doing some virtual stuff. Troy Albert and Whit McGee are going to join us and talk about schools and tornadoes and severe weather. We'll also have lots of other things to talk about.
It's a controversial subject. So you're saying, but you don't have a pick of the week, do you?
Well, no. I had one, and it's in the notes that I gave to Jen. I'd never seen this 1991 video from Andover, Kansas, and she was going to talk about this tonight.
Wait, is this the bridge overpass video?
No, that's a famous one too. And
Duke
that
Evans.
one's got all sorts of controversy around.
Oh, yeah.
And we wanted to talk about that. But there's an even more, well, not more amazing, but a man in a country club there near Andover heard the tornado was coming, had just gotten a video camera, went upstairs on the patio of the country club and shot this video. I had never seen it. And it's pretty amazing. It'll be my pick of the week. It's a man named Duke Evans. His video, the Andover tornado from the Teradyne Country Club. You can see it hit the mobile home park. And just the destruction is just amazing. And it's just lucky that the tornado, didn't hit the country club and that he lived to tell about it. But that's my pick of the week, James. So we'll do that a little prematurely.
Yeah, well, awesome. Well, I hate to, goodness, we just started here. We're having to turn this thing off. I mean,
We need a part two.
We need a part two. We really need a part two on this one. But again, it's a hard out because I've got to get in the phone booth and change into Superman here to do some television. So if you want to send us an email, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. All of the show notes, picks of the week, it'll be on the website, weatherbrains.com. We typically do this every Monday night, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. So join us next week or listen on your favorite podcast app and write one of those iTunes reviews if you listen on iTunes or via Apple Podcasts. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless.
Thanks, Jen, for
everybody.
doing
Hate
this.
to
Yeah.
wrap
Thank you
this up,
guys. It was
man.
awesome. Thank
It
you.
was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for
Bye,
joining
guys.
us.
Show.